Good evening. Today is July 24th, 2021. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
Welcome to America in Danger. Now, we are taking calls, so if you have something you'd like to say, a point you'd like to make, or even a correction, if you want to correct us on something, that's fine. Give us a call, even if you have a differing opinion. We certainly are open to listening to that.
Well, and I would call, but I agree with myself, so, you know.
That's one thing for certain.
Right, that's right. I agree with myself. That's right.
We take solace in agreeing with ourselves.
That's right.
Well, you know, we currently have a lot going on in government with spending, a tremendous amount of spending, an overly zealous amount of spending, a drunken sailor weekend.
Profligate.
It is unbelievable. And, you know, what's interesting is they passed a little spending bill in the Senate and sent it over to the House. Mm-hmm. And Nancy Pelosi has the audacity to say, well, you know what, we're not even going to consider this until you agree to spend $3 trillion more.
3.5, I believe.
3.5, yeah. Absolutely unbelievable. And the interesting thing about that is most people don't have a clue what that does to the middle and lower incomes.
Yeah, I would say, in fact, most people probably couldn't even write the number 1 trillion down.
Well, this is true. This is true. They would have to Google how many zeros in a trillion.
How many zeros it is, right. And it's a lot of them, and it's a monumentally large number. And it's a frightening number that we're at the point where we actually, wasn't that long ago that we talked about billions and were scandalized at those orders of magnitude of spending. Now we're in the trillion territory. That starts to sound like a runaway situation to me. It's hard to comprehend that we're,
I agree.
That we're there.
I agree. Now, I tried to find a good video that gives a good overview of what inflation is. Mm-hmm. Because we know that inflation essentially is the growth of the money supply, the artificially inflated growth of the money supply, which means there are more dollars chasing fewer goods. Anyone who's taken basic economics knows that phrase. More dollars chasing fewer goods, which drives up the price.
Well, right. Now, this is always a sticky area. First of all, I think it's important to make the point that a simple increase in prices isn't necessarily inflation.
Correct.
I mean, prices go up for all kinds of reasons. Supply and demand, you have a tsunami, it wipes out the supply of some fruit or vegetable or something that everybody wants, and so the price goes up. That's supply and demand. Mm-hmm. But over time, when you look at the cost of certain things, okay, a so-called basket of goods, and you see that number continually goes up, and you can look at the purchasing power of a dollar. And you can see what has happened to the purchasing power of that dollar. We had a graphic on the show some weeks back, where it showed that essentially since 1933, what you could purchase with $1 in 1933 takes $25 today. That's inflation. That's a situation where the dollars or the currency purchases less and less compared to what it did in the past. And that can only really happen through a couple of mechanisms, and the chief mechanism by which that happens right now is increase in the money supply, like you just pointed out. And that is the reason there are a number of people who support the concept of a gold standard or having the currency pegged to some kind of fixed value, store of value, something that actually represents something that's not so flexible. We have now what they call a fiat paper currency.
Correct.
Which is really backed by nothing than the full faith and credit of the United States government. And to first order, that's been stable, but there has been significant inflation. And in fact, the Federal Reserve, part of their charter is to keep inflation in check. And they feel like 2% is a reasonable number. Well, 2% inflation compounded over 20, 30 years is a lot of inflation. That's a lot of loss of the purchasing power of your dollars. So, it's a complicated subject.
It absolutely is. I was looking at a chart today, and it was showing the increase. I went all the way back to 1920, 100 years. I said, well, I'll look back 100 years and see what it is. The increases in price of just routine things that everyone buys every week were in the thousands of times higher.
Right.
It wasn't 2 times higher, 10 times higher. It was in the thousands of times higher.
Right.
Just this year, I've got a little graphic here, and if Brittany will switch over to the HDMI feed, Look at what we have here. Car rentals have gone up 87%. Used cars 45%. Furniture 8%. Bacon 8%. TVs 7%. Fruit's gone up. Fresh fish has gone up. Milk has gone up.
Right.
And you know.
Now, to be fair, some of that is just bad policy.
Some of it's bad policy.
Gasoline, we shut down pipelines, we quit doing federal oil leases.
Exactly.
I mean, the prices are going to go up. We're making gas scarce. So
that's right. Well, if you notice the text there, it says this is what Build Back Better looks like.
Right.
Because essentially, those are artificially inflated because of bad policy.
Because of bad policy.
Now the inflationary spending, and I've got a graphic as soon as I get to it here. Let's see if I can find it. We can go the right way. Okay, I've got a graphic here that shows some other things. Now, this is 20 years of price changes in the U.S. And if we look...
And that's only 1990.
That's right.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, I feel like that, to me, that seems like not that long ago.
Well, that's not that long ago.
Right.
When you get to thinking about it.
Yeah.
But if you look at this, if you look at the items that have increased in price the most, we have hospital services, college tuition, college textbooks, child care, nursery school, and medical care services. Those are the big four at the top. Now, all of those are heavily subsidized by the government. We have the Affordable Care Act, the Stafford student loans, the various subsidies. And if we look at the bottom, what's interesting there is we actually have some things decreasing in price. And you made an excellent point earlier that those, while they're largely purchased through consumer discretionary spending, they're also subsidized with cheap Chinese slave labor.
Right. That's right. The cheap DVD player that literally, I forget what it was I was looking at the other day. It was $20, and it was some fairly complex piece of electronics. I was thinking, wow, you can get that for $20.
It's amazing.
Yet lunch for two people is in the 25 plus category at anything other than just Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Right.
And, inflation's climbing higher than expected. And yet we have politicians who think nothing of more spending.
Right.
They just have no qualms about saying, well, we got to spend this, we got to spend this. And, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats on the left calling human infrastructure.
Yeah, that's all artifice and legerdemain, which is a fancy word for lying, for dissembling, for for basically gaslighting people, which is what they're doing. This is a difficult topic, and it's a fairly complicated topic. So
it is very complicated.
It requires sort of compartmentalizing the different effects. And frankly, I'm open to being educated on some of this because I really don't fully understand I've never gotten adequate answers to some questions that I would think more people would ask. And one of those things I don't understand is I've heard economists frequently say, okay, well, you need an expanding money supply, okay? You need an expanding money supply in order to work with a growing economy. Mm-hmm. Well, intuitively, I'm not sure I understand why that is. I would love to get an explanation. I'll settle for a sophomore econ major at Wesleyan that'll call in and explain this to me because I do not understand why you wouldn't want a fixed number of dollars in your economy as it grows. That would mean that over time, those dollars purchase more goods. That's as you create wealth. As a member of the society, your dollars should have a share of that wealth in the form of more purchasing power with your dollars. Mm-hmm. Okay, but instead it goes in just the opposite direction. Now, frankly, I think that's the rationale for having something like a gold standard. There's only so much gold in the world. They say all the gold that's ever been mined in the world would fill a large-sized barn. Mm-hmm. Now, that's actually pretty dramatic because we see gold all around us, but really there's not that much of it in existence. And at one time, that was the money. We actually made our $20 gold pieces. Mm-hmm. They said $20, minted, it had all the U.S. stuff and everything on it, and that was the actual currency. Mm-hmm. Now it's just this paper fiat currency which they can create more of and more of. And I think if there's only one point to be made, is that when they do that, they're taxing you. They are stealing your wealth. They are taking, if I have $100,000 saved, and then they add 14-15% to the money supply, those dollars of mine aren't worth as much. They're not going to buy as much, and I'm that's important to me. As time marches forward.
That is correct. It's kind of like who was it, FDR did when he took the country off the gold standard. as soon as the government had confiscated all the gold, he simply declared it at a higher value.
He raised the official price of gold, I think, from something like $23 to $35 an ounce, and this is 1930 something that he
Yeah.
did that. And they actually made gold ownership illegal at that time.
They did, absolutely
Right.
did.
Now, the only reason there are all these gold coins that are available today is because most people said, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not complying. I refuse to comply.
Well,
and they didn't turn in their gold.
There is something to be said about
There is
that.
a lot to be said for that.
But, you know, the interesting thing about this inflation, the increase in the money supply, and it's fascinating that the stock market, Wall Street, the big banks, they love it. Because as the Fed creates this money out of thin air, it first goes through Wall Street and the banks.
They benefit from it first.
They benefit from it because they are able to utilize those funds before the damaging
That's right.
drop in value. So they're using dollars that really ultimately will not be worth what they're using them, what they're getting for them. And as we get them, as they trickle down, so to speak, you know, this is the real evil of trickle-down economics.
Right.
This is the trickle-down that nobody ever thinks about.
Right.
You know, when companies are prosperous, yes, that trickles down and people prosper from that because there are jobs, they make money, they have retirements, they have benefits, they have all those things. That trickle-down economics is okay. But this leftist Keynesian economics, this Keynesian trickle-down economics, is we lose.
Oh, absolutely.
All the way around. Because ultimately, as we showed on that graphic earlier, all of these consumer goods that have dropped in price because of cheap Chinese slave labor, a loss of quality, those are the things that we get.
That's right, and really, I think that's sort of the sugar high.
Yeah,
you know,
that
it's
is.
used to mollify the masses. He's like, yeah, I can't afford a house, but boy, I can get a $20 DVD player.
Yeah, and I'm
You
getting
know,
a raise next
right.
week.
And I just got a new cell phone that does all these great things.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it occurred to me while you were talking, I think a useful way to understand this mechanism of inflation, this increase in the money supply, is to consider what one of the wartime actions that we took against the Axis powers, that's the Nazis and the fascists and the Japanese who we fought in World War II, we would drop bales of counterfeit money, counterfeit German currency into their nation. Well, what was the purpose of that? Was to destroy and debase the purchasing power of their, you know, I mean, if you could counterfeit, if you had your own printing, and why is counterfeiting illegal? It's illegal because it gives you purchasing power that you really aren't entitled to. And that's exactly what this monetizing the debt does, which the Federal Reserve does. It's the same thing. So in a way, it's an act of domestic warfare by our own elites and our own governing entities against the people who earn and create the wealth in this country.
It is.
That's how I see it.
It is, and now that you mention that, you know, there was a point not too long ago, a couple of years ago, I think, where it was discovered that the Chinese were counterfeiting, doing a lot of counterfeiting of American dollars.
Right.
And that's to try to destabilize our economy.
Destabilize and just, you know, inflate the currency that much further. Right.
Exactly. You know, there was a tweet from the Libertarian Party, and if you remember when Ron Paul ran for president in 08,
Right.
okay, he made this comment during the debate. He said, if the left understood inflation for what it is, an increase in the money supply, which results not only in higher prices, but the corporate and banking elite being the first to get their hands on it before inflation kicks in,
The effects, that's right.
they'd be screaming,
In the Fed. I didn't know for
right
sure, but I
along
was
with
pretty
us.
sure.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Yes,
That's
Ron Paul
exactly
was
right.
big on ending the Fed, getting rid of the Fed, because the Fed, if you've ever read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, fascinating story, fascinating history of the creation, the inception of the Federal Reserve Bank.
It's a very interesting book.
It is.
Reads like a
and
novel.
It does. And the lengths that those bankers and globalists and elitists went through to keep that under wraps. They met in secret. They traveled in secret. Even though a lot of them weren't hunters, they actually bought hunting rifles So that as they rode the train, they could say, "Oh, we're going on safari, or
It
we're
was all
going
sort of
hunting."
that was a ruse. As a ruse.
As a ruse, yeah. When the reality was they were headed to Jekyll Island, Georgia, to meet and form the Federal Reserve to seize control of the U.S. currency.
Well, without droning on ad nauseum, I think the important point about the Federal Reserve that most people don't realize is that it is not an arm of the federal government.
Cool.
It is a private bank. It is privately owned, and the United States government has simply turned over its responsibility for monitoring and maintaining the currency to a group of private bankers. Okay. I mean, Alexander Hamilton was a proponent of a central bank, but he didn't prevail. We didn't have a central bank in this country until 1913. And all these nations around the world, they have their various central banks. The Bundesbank in Germany, and the EU has their I think they call it just ECB, Euro Central Bank, European Central Bank. So it's really kind of a cabal of banking interests, and that's a recurrent theme in a lot of this stuff, and it gets very complicated and hard to delineate. But one thing that's not hard to delineate is that inflation is real, and it's created by inflation. It's created by printing of money or creation of money out of thin air, and that steals your productivity. That's the bottom line.
That's exactly right. And I mentioned earlier that I tried to find a good video on inflation that we could show tonight to just give everyone a good, in a nutshell version of what inflation is. Unfortunately, almost every video on inflation out there talks about rising prices.
Talks about and the way they subtly
prices.
They talk about and the way they subtly distinguish this, say, well, that's price inflation as distinguished from formal economic, academically defined monetary inflation, which is an increase in the money supply. That's the definition of inflation.
Right.
So it's all very muddy and complicated, and as I pointed out earlier, just an increase in prices isn't automatically inflation.
Correct. There are any number. We saw increases in prices because of the COVID.
Right.
Because of the pandemic, because
Right.
of the lockdowns, because of various things. We're seeing inflation in restaurant pricing.
Right.
Because of bad policy.
Because of bad policy. That's right.
Because of the continued subsidy of unemployment, and people simply do not want to go back to work when they're drawing more than they would make working. It's good for them, it's bad for everyone else, and it's not a good government policy.
Well, inflation is like a rise in background radiation levels. It happens behind the scenes over a long period of time.
Right.
And so all one has to do, I know a few years ago, driving through Kinston on the way to the beach, and stopped, and there's a restaurant there, King's Restaurant. It's a well-known, good sort of, it's been there forever. And they have on display their menu from 1975 or 1974. Well, it's shocking what a meal in 1975 at that restaurant cost. It was $2 for a full-blown meal that now is $7, $12, $14, $16. Okay, that's inflation. There's no reason for that meal to cost that much more today. It should cost less through modern farming techniques, food production, all the things that we've talked about already. Our dollar should purchase more, not less over time.
I agree. And just one more issue that we're seeing, talking about bad government policy. As government subsidizes things, then naturally the price for those things goes up.
Right.
As I mentioned, student loans.
Right.
We see tuition in colleges. We're not getting better education in colleges. We're not seeing an overall net gain in what these students are learning in college.
That's right.
What we're seeing is colleges knowing that because government is subsidizing the tuitions through the form of student loans and guarantees and what have you, they can simply continue to raise their tuition.
Right, and that's not exactly inflation,
No,
that's just lack of
that's not.
market discipline because of
Right.
the third party paying the bill.
That is bad government policy.
And to put that into a personal experience, think about when you have an accident with your automobile and you go to get quotes on the repair. The insurance company's paying for it, you go to 3 body shops, you don't even care what the price, you don't even look at the numbers, like, yeah, whatever, somebody else is paying the bill. That's what these government subsidies, that's the mentality that produces, so nobody's actually looking at what they're spending when somebody else is paying the bill. Same things happen to medicine.
Exactly. And while it's not inflation, it is a rise in prices.
From bad policy,
From bad policy.
That's right.
Exactly. All right, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we are going to be discussing the COVID and the number of lies and deceptions that we've seen. And again, Mr. Fauci is on the hot seat, and it's very hard to cover for him on this one, so Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company in Rocky Mountain Infield. If you've been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately, you've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers, everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Rocky Mount Prep is currently seeking 9th grade students interested in getting a head start on college and career. Beginning in August 2021, Rocky Mount Prep's College and Career Academy will allow students to begin earning free college and career credits from Nash Community College and North Carolina Wesleyan College while enrolled in high school. The Academy will also provide students who are interested in pursuing the military with an opportunity to gain both course and hands-on training that will prepare them to become a military officer. Enroll by August 9th for the College and Career Academy at rmprep.org.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we're back, and we've been through a good, 16 months now of pandemic. Panic started basically in February of last year, and has run through now, so almost 18 months of it, almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
And the sad part about it is that there has been so much misinformation and deception and outright lies. And I'm not talking about those coming from those who are being censored on Facebook or Twitter or any of that. I'm talking about coming from our government.
Right. The authorities.
Coming from our officials, coming from the medical industry, coming from the corporate entities.
Yep.
And it just, we see so many things that just slap you in the face and defy common sense.
Well, right, and they're at a point where they do that regularly on a number of topics. Jeffrey Epstein he killed himself,
Right.
and you're just supposed to believe what they say and just ignore your lying eyes.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Fauci, who is the god of the pandemic, there are actually people who put yard signs with his face on it, almost like a communist nation saying, "Thank you, Dr. Fauci."
Oh, I know, and there were all these pin-headed women out there saying he's the sexiest man alive and all that. I mean, they just, on The View, and all, that just talk about moronic behavior. I'm sorry,
That it is.
Hate to insult the View watchers out there, but,
Yeah. All right, but anyway, we know that he has flip-flopped more than a flounder at the coast.
Right.
I don't think I've ever seen a fish do that many flip-flops. Anyway, I've got a video, and this is from the latest Senate hearing about COVID. And I want you to watch this and pay careful attention because Rand Paul is zeroing in on the essence of the question that needs to be asked, and that's about gain-of-function research. Now, Dr. Fauci tries to wrap him around the axle, saying, oh, well, those viruses, molecularly, they could never result in SARS-CoV-2.
Right.
That's not what Rand Paul is saying. He's saying there was gain-of-function research being funded through Dr. Fauci's organization with his full knowledge of it.
Which he denied.
Which he denies and continues to deny.
Right.
So take a look at this video, and we'll be back to talk about it after this.
Viruses that in nature only infect animals were manipulated in the Wuhan lab to gain the function of infecting humans. This research fits the definition of the research that the NIH said was subject to the pause in 2014 to 2017, a pause in funding on gain of function. But the NIH failed to recognize this, defines it away, and it never came under any scrutiny. Dr. Richard E. Bright, a molecular biologist from Rutgers, described this research in Wuhan as the Wuhan lab used NIH funding to construct novel chimeric SARS-related coronaviruses able to infect human cells and laboratory animals. This is high-risk research that creates new potential pandemic pathogens that exist only in the lab, not in nature. This research matches, these are Dr. E. Bright's words, this research matches, indeed epitomizes, the definition of gain-of-function research, done entirely in Wuhan, for which there was supposed to be a federal pause. Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2, that's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It is molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain of function research was going on in that lab and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result in SARS-CoV-2.
Caused the pandemic. We're saying they are gain of function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
admit the truth.
And you implying.
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci. And thanks to all of our panelists for being here today. And thank you, Chair Murray and Ranking Member Burr. I just want to say, Dr. Fauci, is there anything more that you would like to say to counteract these attacks on your integrity that we've all just witnessed?
Well, Senator, thank you. I don't think I have anything further to say. This is a pattern that Senator Paul has been doing now at multiple hearings based on no reality. He keeps talking about gain of function. This has been evaluated multiple times by qualified people to not fall under the gain of function definition. I have not lied before Congress. I have never lied, certainly not before Congress. Case closed.
Case closed.
According to
Dr. Fauci.
Correct.
Well, I'm afraid that the case is not closed.
Yeah, he's looking a little nervous to me, frankly.
He's looking very nervous. And he was very upset and was on the verge of becoming belligerent.
Right.
And of course, the sycophantic senator that chimed in the last 10 seconds there, Senator Smith, who wanted to give Dr. Fauci a chance to repel the character attacks from Senator Paul.
To counteract.
The character
just
attacks.
said.
Well, first of all, there were no character attacks here. What Rand Paul said was factual. He said that the report says that viruses were manipulated to increase transmissibility from an animal species to the human cells.
Right.
Now, that, my friends, is gain of function research.
The definition of it is the very definition of gain of function.
Now, Dr. Fauci's definition of gain of function, and this is the critical thing about what they're saying here, and this is what they're not telling you. Their analysis of those documents says, yes, this was not gain of function because it did not result in SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah, that's
okay. That's a lie.
That's right.
That's obfuscation.
That is.
That's manipulation. That's twisting it around to make people think that it's something that it's not. But the bottom line is, it is gain of function research.
Right, as Rand Paul pointed out, and just to remind everybody, he's an MD as well, so
That's
he has studied these issues at a minimum level, at least in medical school, and certainly has he's a surgeon, eye surgeon, but certainly he understands basic virology and cell structure, and is well equipped, probably more so than most others on that panel, to actually discuss these things in a literate way.
Yep.
Okay, scientifically literate way. Clearly gain of function research has occurred,
Yes,
but nobody's saying that the specific gain of function research that resulted in those viruses that were the subject of that paper are the SARS-CoV-2. No,
Correct.
Nobody's saying that. It's simply saying that research took place. It was funded by the NIH. Dr. Fauci says that is not the case. But you can't just say, well, that's not true, that doesn't meet the definition. It does meet the definition.
It absolutely does.
Right.
Dr. Fauci is lying to the American public, which he's done in numerous cases. But it's interesting, it doesn't matter if that particular funding for gain of function research resulted in SARS-CoV-2 or not. Because what it did, it paid for the research that the Chinese were doing, which ultimately allowed them to develop SARS-CoV-2.
And again, I'll ask this question, and why are we even funding Chinese labs with taxpayer dollars for this purpose? First of all, don't we have enough equipped labs in this country? Don't we have enough grad students and fellows, postdoc and MDs to do the research in the various universities? Why do we need to be collaborating with Chinese communist scientists who certainly have nefarious objectives at best?
Exactly.
I don't understand. Just right there, to me, that ought to be the line of questioning in these Senate panels.
It should be. It should absolutely be the line of questioning. And these Democrat senators who get up there and play footsie with Dr. Fauci and engage in his hero worship are a threat to all of us in this nation.
And he hasn't even been that good as a lying spokesman, for their cause. I mean, he's inconsistent. He's all over the place. First, and he's admitted to lying on several because he didn't think that we could handle. For example, I think first of all, he told us not to wear masks. That was one.
Correct.
So, the reason I told everybody that was because I didn't want the mask to get sucked up and not be available for our medical workers. Well, okay, whatever your motivation was, you lied. I mean,
you lied.
So already you shot your credibility. And then there was another thing he lied about. The herd immunity number. Okay, he claimed that we would reach herd immunity at some lower number, and later he said, well, it's really higher, but I didn't want people to know that because I didn't think they could handle that fact. And so I gave him a lower number. Well, again, you condescending blankety blank, you lied. You lied, and so you've lost your credibility with me.
Absolutely.
I don't know whatever your motivation is.
You lie. Hey, I'm sorry. It's like a thief. Once you steal something from me,
correct.
You're a thief.
That's correct.
And, it takes a long time to overcome that. We got a call on the line. Caller, thanks for calling. What's on your mind tonight?
A little bit of hair.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Anyhow, I just want to thank you gentlemen for what you're doing and advise your listeners that the rich and the powerful are feeding this nation lies and deception. I mean, 99.99% of the American people don't even know why the Civil War was fought.
This is true.
And, excuse me?
I say this is true. That is very true.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, y'all keep up the good work, and we'll keep watching.
All right.
Thank you for the call. We certainly appreciate it. Well, he's right. I mean, to be fair, they don't know very much about why any of our wars have been fought.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I read somewhere where the majority of young people now, I forget the age bracket, they think that that Pearl Harbor was bombed in response to our bombing of Hiroshima. So we're in deep trouble on that front.
We absolutely are. But we're talking about some lies that Dr. Fauci came out with, and he wasn't the only one. I mean, we had the World Health Organization, the WHO,
in the pocket of China.
Definitely covering for China. We have our own CDC who manipulated things. In fact, the CDC came out early in the pandemic and redefined how deaths should be reported. Because typically the primary cause of death is listed as number one cause of death with underlying elements there.
Contributing factors.
The CDC, the Center for Disease Control in this country, came out and they said, you should report any death or more deaths with COVID as being the primary, which overinflated the death reports.
Oh, greatly.
In fact, when they go back, and we've seen some counties go back here recently, and they're finding upwards of 22% drop in the cause of death being COVID.
I think you mentioned on last week's show, is it Santa Clara, California?
California.
Where they have retroactively reviewed their numbers and they've retroactively lowered the number.
Yeah, 22% decrease. Yeah. So, we know that it was overreported. There were monetary incentives for hospitals to overreport, and the CDC came out with guidelines to overreport. Now, they didn't come out and they didn't say word for word, yes, you need to overreport, but that was the implication.
Well, and they built incentives. They built incentives,
That's exactly right. We were told universal mask usage will stop the COVID, will stop the pandemic. Well, I really wish someone would come out with a graphic and show me where the trajectory of cases
really
was affected
in any way.
In any way whatsoever.
I mean, physically, it doesn't make sense. Virus particles are very, very tiny.
Yes.
And the mesh size opening on those masks is very, very large.
Yes.
Like trying to keep mosquitoes at bay with some hurricane fencing. I mean, it's just,
It is.
Doesn't really.
Well, the best kind of simplistic explanation I've seen of that was you might as well wear Swiss cheese.
Or fish netting.
Or fish netting. And since Swiss cheese has holes in it, if you use several layers of it, well, the holes will be blocked by other holes, so you'll be okay.
Except for you won't be able to breathe.
this is true. And you'll smell like Swiss cheese, but it's the same thing with a mask. You can wear 2 masks. You can wear 3 masks. You can wear 5 masks.
Or you can wear none and have the exact same effect.
As they did in Sweden.
As they did in Sweden.
And their viral trajectory, their pandemic trajectory was no different than anywhere else in the world. And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the wokeness that's going on in politics, in business, in government, in the military, everywhere. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is Nicholas Bellamy at Premier Equipment. I'm going to talk about the 4540 Mahindra. It's 38 horsepower, full cylinder engine. The weight of this tractor is 4,000 pounds. This tractor is perfect for bush hogging, distance, small garden, a hunting club tractor. Comes with a 7-year warranty, 2-year bumper to bumper, additional 5-year on the powertrain. You can have this tractor for $200 a month, and we have 20 of these tractors in stock. Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we're back. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about CRT.
Cathode ray tubes?
No, critical race theory.
Oh, okay.
Critical race theory. I'd much rather talk about cathode ray tubes, even though I don't know much about them.
Well, at least it's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
It is a real thing because critical race theory is all contrived, made up.
Nonsense. But destructive. It's real in the sense that it's destructive.
Very destructive.
Yeah.
And it originated with Nicole Hannah-Jones. Now, Nicole Hannah-Jones is not some well-known researcher. She's not a historian. She's, I guess she's a professor now because she was hired by Harvard when UNC wouldn't give her a tenured position and kneel down and kiss her ring.
Actually, that was a mystery. It wasn't Harvard, it was Howard.
Howard, okay. All right. Excellent. I was thinking it was Harvard.
Yeah, no.
I never went back to that article.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Howard University.
I made the same. I did the same little misread on that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my opinion of Harvard went up slightly, but it's still in the negative.
Oh,
so,
well, yeah. They've irretrievably damaged their reputation.
Yeah, it's not that much better at this point.
Yeah.
I love the quote by Thomas Sowell. He says, the best thing about having a Harvard degree is you realize that you really don't have to be in awe of anybody with a Harvard degree anymore.
That's right. Well, I've kind of come to that conclusion without the benefit of a Harvard degree.
I agree. Well, I've got a degree from ECU, and I vowed to send them an invoice and demand some of my money back because I felt like I was shortchanged in that degree.
Right. Well, I feel the same way about both my alma maters. So,
I just really was disappointed in some of the classes, and it was not what I expected. But anyway, back to the critical race theory. Nicole Hannah-Jones, she wrote the 1619 Project.
Right.
Now, the 1619 Project is a lie that says that the United States was not founded on religious freedom or people wanting to get away from the European monarchies or any of those things.
And it wasn't founded in 1776.
It was founded in 1619,
right.
And it was all based on the perpetuation of slavery.
Right.
Now, we know that's a lie. And in that development of that project, Black Lives Matter and all of these other organizations, The bottom line is that they are based on Marxist philosophy.
Correct.
And critical race theory, in a nutshell, divides people into two classes. You are either an oppressor or you are a victim. And if you are the victim, then critical race theory says that now it's time to make the oppressors the victim.
Right. It basically says that the only way you can't, it's not sufficient to have a colorblind society in which people genuinely are judged on what they bring to the table and on their individual merit, but rather that we have to engage in active, what they call anti-racism, which means that you codify in the legal system and in your business practice overt racism against what they perceive as the former oppressor.
Yep.
Okay, and it's highly destructive, and
It is very destructive.
but it appears to be in full swing here in the United States right now.
It is. In the military, General Milley has come out and said he wants to study white rage. Well, I'm sorry. I just, I was in the military in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 63 years old now, and I really just have not seen this white rage, this elusive white rage that they talk about.
I don't know. He needs to spend a little more time studying Sun Tzu, because I think we're going to need that a lot more.
I agree.
The famous Chinese warrior who wrote Art of War, and which has historically been one of the main texts that our generals and military men have studied. And if ever there's a place where you need cohesiveness and sense of purpose and unity, it's the military.
Absolutely.
So, and that has been largely the case in the United States military. I mean, people from all kinds of backgrounds have gone in the military, okay, as a way to get some training and feel a sense of purpose and maybe figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, or perhaps choose a military career. But I've never heard, and I've talked to lots of different people from different backgrounds, different races who are in the military, and I've never heard any of them express a sense of, oh yeah, it was so unfair. I got this bad treatment because I came from, poor white people who lived in trailers, or I was black or Hispanic. I never heard anything but praise for, or at least no active dissent about that aspect of their existence in the military. They've always viewed it as, we all got treated the same, like soldiers.
That's right. That was my takeaway from the military. When you go in, essentially they shave your head, they put you all in ugly green uniforms, by the way.
Right.
It's pretty miserable the first few weeks, but you know what? Everyone is the same.
Yeah.
And you pull through, you work with everyone, you become a unit.
Right.
And that's the whole thing about the military.
The whole point.
All of this stuff where there are claims of racism, you're always going to have people who are idiots in any organization. You're always going to have that. But there is no widespread systematic racism in the military any longer.
No, there's not.
Now, at one time, it was highly segregated and
that's all right.
Very unfair in those ways. It's not now. And that's where this country's gone. This country has made great strides.
Well, and the important thing to note is that the United States has always been at the forefront of those things.
Yep.
I mean, for all this talk about how horrible it is, I don't see anybody holding up any of these other societies as bastions of egalitarianism and prosperity and fairness. None of them are.
Well, that's right.
I mean, all the people who are trying to break into this country, they're trying to break into this country. I don't see anybody trying to break into China.
Well, that's right.
Or even Japan.
Unless you're coming from North Korea.
Well, that's right. Then that looks like an upgrade.
Now, Nicole Hannah-Jones, the originator of the 1619 Project and the recently hired from Howard University tenured professor,
right?
Who I guess they rolled out the red carpet for, but she has made statements about how wonderful Cuba is.
Right.
We see Cubans right now protesting in the street, risking their lives. Now, that's the difference between the protest in Cuba and the protest here in the United States.
That's correct.
Here in the United States, the leftist Democrats and the media will claim that violent riots are mostly peaceful protests.
Well, those protesters are actually foot soldiers for the leftist Democrats. That's the way you have to look and understand that.
That is true. That is true. Now, in Cuba, if you go out and protest, what happens is you're beat in the street, you're arrested, you disappear, or they come and get you in the middle of the night and you're never seen again.
And they take reprisals against your family. Now, I've got a clip, and it's an audio recording of Hannah Nicole Jones, and I want you to listen to this, and I want you to pay close attention to what she says about Cuba. So, Brittany, if you'll run that Hannah Nicole Jones clip.
Are there candidates right now, or even just places that you think have a viable and sufficiently ambitious integration agenda? And if so, what is it? that laugh said a lot right there.
Yeah. I mean, let me just, I'm definitely not an expert on race relations internationally. And it's also hard to look at countries that didn't have, large institutions of slavery and compare them to the United States. The answer is probably going to be surprising that I'm going to give, which is if you want to see the most equal multiracial, it's not a democracy, most equal multiracial country in our hemisphere, it would be Cuba. Cuba has the least inequality between black and white people of any place really in the hemisphere. That's, the Caribbean, most of the Caribbean, it's hard to count because the white population in a lot of those countries is very, very small. They're countries run by black folks, but in places that are truly, at least biracial countries, Cuba actually has the least inequality. And that's largely due to socialism, which I'm sure no one wants to hear.
Yeah. So, what does that actually imply for us? I mean, if you're a candidate running and you want to have a genuine integration agenda, like what might that look like? Like, what do you think could work?
All right, so Cuba has achieved racial equality.
So I expect to see a mass exodus. And now that that's been revealed, I expect that lots of people in this country who feel oppressed are going to want to emigrate to Cuba. I mean, they're probably going to be crossing the ones that are coming that way in the boats. coming from there, they're going to, we're going where we're going to go take your spot because it's so equal and so egalitarian, and it's such a great place to be. There aren't any boat people from the United States going to Cuba. There's a reason for that.
That is correct.
That place is a blank hole. Okay, and everybody knows it, and for her to say that reveals the fact that she's a communist.
And her whole historical perspective on that is a lie also. Very, for lack of a better word, ignorant of the history of Cuba. Cuba did, in fact, have a slave contingent.
Absolutely.
And they didn't abolish slavery until much later than the United States. It was 1886, 87, somewhere in that time, before Cuba abolished slavery.
Right. She's an ahistorical nitwit.
She is a nitwit.
Of the entire slave trade that occurred throughout its history, only 4% of those slaves ever made it or were in North America or in the United States of America.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very tiny fraction of people who owned them in the plantation South. Really didn't contribute much to the overall arc of this country. That's another misnomer, is that somehow the country was built on the back of slaves. That's nonsense as well. I mean, that's just not, it was the industrial Northeast that built this country as a large industrial superpower. I'm sorry, those are just the facts from history. Okay, she is just a hack. She is the definition of a hack.
Absolutely horrible. A liar. She fabricates things, and you could tell from the interview that was going on there that the interviewer was probably, I'm guessing, maybe university radio station, maybe, and just all in awe of Hannah Nicole Jones and very amenable to socialism, because they made the point that, well, that would be socialism, and if you were a candidate, what would your platform on that look like? And of course, it would be more of the same thing that we see in the left and the Democrats and the AOCs and the Rashida Tlaibs and
well, if equality is your ultimate, if that's the holy grail, it's achievable, but it means that everybody's equally poor, equally miserable, Frankly, I'd rather live in a society where some people drive Chevys and some people drive Rolls and live in one where nobody gets a car of any kind. And that's really what you're talking about.
That's correct.
Okay, I mean, that's just as that simple. And frankly, I don't think people understand how comfortable and soft and relaxed and prosperous this country is for even the poorest among us.
Well, that's why we have 50+% of the world's migration.
That's right.
Coming here.
That's right.
So we know that this country is basically a promised land to many nations of the world.
That's
and
right.
Look at our country. The Cuban protesters, what were they flying? Were they flying Cuban Marxist flags? Were they flying Russian communist flags? No, they were flying American flags.
Well, I heard an interview with some Ugandan citizens, and they were saying, you know, we would be perfectly happy if our ancestors had been slaves in the United States, because that would mean that we were there now instead of where we are now. Okay? To the extent that slavery benefited anybody, it benefited everybody downstream. Okay? I mean, whatever occurred, okay, is the past. The society exists as it does now, and everybody is a full participant. Everybody has full rights under the Constitution and as much opportunity as you care to make of that opportunity you can make of it, better than any other place in the world. And they're trying to ruin it. They're trying to destroy it and sow divisiveness and create strife in a way that is going to be very bloody if they aren't careful.
Well, they're absolutely right, because I believe that what's happening now is the silent majority that we've heard talked of for years, the people who just want to live their lives and be left alone, the people who are not activists, who don't come out, they're quickly becoming the angry majority.
Yeah, and that's actually that isn't necessarily a good thing.
No, it's not, because, I'm afraid that those people will not burn buildings and turn cars over.
That's right. That's right. I mean, once people get really ticked, it could be,
Yeah, it could be rather ugly.
Yeah.
And, so we want to get rid of this CRT, critical race theory. So pay attention to what they're teaching you kids in school.
Please do. Yeah.
Pay attention to what's being passed at the city council meetings, at the county commissioner meetings, at the General Assembly meetings in Raleigh. Pay attention. That's all we're asking.
And remember, all this that they're doing is with a single objective: to corrupt, delegitimize, and destroy the Constitution of the United States, which guarantees individual liberty. It gives you, as the individual, regardless of your group identity, it gives you as an individual the most ability to live your life the way you want and to reach your potential. That's what's under assault.
That is correct. And with that, we're going to close for tonight. Hope you enjoyed America in Danger. We'll be back back next week, next Saturday, for more America in Danger. So pay attention to what's going on out there. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
Good night.
Thank you.